And welcome back to another episode of Building the Board. My name is Quentin Crisco. This episode, though, will be all about these two guys, Tom Kavanaugh and Luke O'Grady, as they are talking about wide receivers. So strap in, get ready for some wide receiver talk. Gentlemen, it's all you guys.
What's going on, Luke? I am really excited to talk about this wide receiver class. I mean, me and you have been talking for like the past couple days in, lead up to this, and I was trying to get your takes, see if I'm way off. Oh man, I'm really excited.
Agreed. It's funny. That's like one of the funner things about doing this whole thing is like doing your research, like getting an opinion of someone, like maybe getting a comp that you like, and then bringing it up to the other guys and be like, "Hey, what do you guys think? Like, where are you at?" And like we've had a couple that we were like bang on agreed with that I think maybe like unpopular takes with some people, and then some other guys we didn't agree with. So this would be a fun way of kind of like fleshing some of that out.
Most definitely. And I think the best way to start this conversation is kind of talk about what the Bears already have, because obviously we're going to talk about these guys as draft evaluators, Luke, but it all comes back to the Bears and what kind of they're going to be looking for in this draft process. So I think the best way to assess it is where they're at now. And obviously, when you look at the Bears wide receiver depth chart, it's led with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze.
Yeah.
And then obviously the Bears just made another signing in Olamide Zaccheaus. I don't know. There's some other guys on the roster, Tyler Scott, Samori Toure, John Jackson III. But do you think that heading into this year that DJ Moore and Rome Odunze is enough to roll in with?
Alone, no, but with Tyler Scott and Olamide Zaccheaus, if they decided to not take another really big swing at the position for a year, that would probably be fine. I think Tyler Scott and Olamide Zaccheaus honestly can probably give you a speed option if you like. I think when you look at the Bears roster overall and you think about Ben Johnson, like that really fast, like game-breaking speed guy is probably the guy left to fill the roster. It felt like that was a big part of how that offense moved with Jameson Williams in Detroit. But if we don't make another move, it's probably fine. I think Olamide Zaccheaus is a really nice third receiver, and I think Tyler Scott, his thing was being a fast receiver in the past. So hopefully Ben Johnson can get the most out of him if we weren't able to make a move. But we've been, I've been kind of like highlighting the roster spots and the amount of people that we're expecting to keep and how many we kind of have left to make that move. And I think with the Olamide Zaccheaus move, we probably only have maybe one or two moves left at that receiver spot. I would be surprised if Samori Toure or John Jackson make it to the roster come September. I think at the moment you kind of have to imagine that we have four, and I think Tyler Scott probably sticks. Olamide Zaccheaus, Rome Odunze, and DJ Moore. So I would say we probably have four in what is usually a 6-person room.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Luke. I think that those are the four guys that are going to be looking for this next upcoming season. I mean, obviously DJ Moore and Rome Odunze weren't going anywhere, but I do think they're going to want to keep Tyler Scott around because he does give them a speed element, but even though he hasn't shown much in his career thus far. And then I think Olamide Zaccheaus is more like your slot receiver, your blocker. I think all these guys can block, but I think that's primarily what he's going to be on the field for. And then obviously give you some underneath, yards after the catch ability. I'm just really curious to see what each receiver's role is going to be within this offense. I was very adamant and I guess outspoken about how grossly I thought the receivers were being misused last year. I thought they were trying to make DJ Moore something he wasn't. I thought, they're trying to make him this X receiver, this isolation, play on the line of scrimmage, win one-on-one, which has never really been DJ Moore's game. He's more of a yards after the catch flanker type. And then Rome Odunze, I thought that was more of his game, and they weren't really using him as such, and they were trying to funnel the offense through Keenan Allen. It was very frustrating. So I'm curious to see what Ben Johnson does differently. I'm curious to see if he brings over like an Amon-Ra St. Brown role for any of these guys, or he just creates a whole new type of offense, because outside of the offense, we really don't know what he looks for outside of Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown in receiving.
I know. It's funny because, I think you're right. I think we were trying to pigeonhole DJ Moore into an X receiver role, which I think he can do. Like, he has better downfield stuff than I think people give him credit for, but it's not his strength. It's like he can do it, but it's not what he's great at. And I agree that it probably is what Rome Odunze is. Like, he is an X receiver that can probably do some of the other stuff if you need him to. But it's funny when you look at Ben Johnson's offense in Detroit, there wasn't a very obvious X receiver type role, which makes me, it makes me wonder how he envisions how they're going to use Rome Odunze, and specifically like on the outside, because it was obvious how they wanted to use Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it was obvious how they wanted to take advantage of Jamison Williams. And those are like, that's your classic X and your classic speed guy. So it will be interesting to see how Rome Odunze fits into that. I think that if you want to do like, scheming up touches for DJ Moore and putting him in the slot and stuff like that, that's easy. And Ben Johnson's already said, like in his press conference, he said he thinks that DJ Moore is one of the best receivers with the ball in his hand in football. And then he made that comment about, no block, no rock, which I think is a good thing. But it isn't exactly obvious how Rome Odunze is going to be used, and if it's going to be, trying to look like Detroit or do their own thing here. And then, exactly.
I was literally just thinking about a sacrificial X. Like that's the only X receivers we know about Ben Johnson.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, okay, is that was that out of necessity of what was going on in Detroit, or is that how he envisions an offense? So I think to say with confidence how the Bears will or should go about this would probably be naive, but I think, it would be surprising to use Rome Odunze any other way than like really being that true X. And I think, we would agree skill set wise, you kind of just have to get the ball into DJ Moore's hands more. But I do think that there's still probably holes if Ben Johnson and Poles were interested to get like a really pure route running slot guy and a really pure, like take the top off the defense speed guy. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Bears had a couple of guys in this draft, like circled that maybe not at 10, but, coming around at the turn of the second round or at pick 72, some guys circled that if they're there, they might look at it.
Most definitely. I definitely think that the receivers like not off the board in terms of addressing in this draft class by any means. I definitely think they're going to want to add to this room. The last thing I think we can end this conversation on, like who we think is going to do what. I've heard the idea thrown out by like guys like Nate Tice and some other people that are curious to see also how the Bears receivers fit into this offense. About like maybe Rome Odunze could possibly be like the power slot Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't really think that's Rome's game because I don't think Rome is like that great after the catch. Like I think he's fine. He's not bad, but that's definitely not a strength of his. I don't know necessarily if that's DJ Moore's like DJ Moore can play in the slot. Obviously, I'm not saying that's not what I'm saying. I just don't know if he's like the option route choice route runner that Amon-Ra St. Brown is. I just think there are two totally different receivers entirely. And I'm just wondering if like the offense looks totally different in terms of what both of those guys are asked to do to really maximize their strength. So just a bunch of different possibilities that could happen. And luckily, I'll say, Luke, that this draft class is full of all different types of receivers.
It's funny. I don't know if it's just that receiver is such an easy position to look good at, or if it that's where naturally all of these amazing athletes funnel when you're starting to play football these days. But the last 3 or 4 draft classes, I just think there's been such a cool and deep class at receiver that it's like, pick your flavor type thing. I think I agree that it's like, it's not exactly obvious how Rome Odunze or DJ Moore fit into this offense. And both of those receivers are interesting in that, like, if you ask them to play any of the positions that receivers asked to play on an offense, they probably could do it all right. But other than maybe the X receiver for Rome Odunze, like, neither of them really fit into an obvious role when you're like thinking about the roles of a receiver in an offense. But it's nice in that it probably gives you some flexibility in that you can play to your board. You can take the best player available. Like if a speed guy's there, you can make Rome Odunze and DJ Moore do stuff in the slot that will work out for you. Like they can win on one cut stuff if they need to. But if you have a guy that's great in the slot, like you can have DJ Moore be a deep guy, or you could have those are both 4-4 guys. Despite the fact that they're not really viewed as speed guys, you can use them in a lot of different ways. And it probably allows you to look at your board and when you're making a pick and if a receiver's there, if you like, not have to worry about, it's not a fit. Like you can kind of make it work.
Most definitely. I definitely think they give a lot more flexibility than Ben Johnson even had in Detroit with the 2 guys that he had. I think they were more so role players than the versatility that the receivers with the Bears offer them. But why don't we dive into this draft class? Yeah. And why don't we start off with the top guy on the list of receivers we're going to go through? Because I'm really curious to hear your take. This is not a guy that is probably going to be in the range for the Bears. And, he's one of the most highly regarded players in this draft class and in recent memory.
Yeah.
And that is Travis Hunter from Colorado. the cornerback / wide receiver. Luke, what did you see with Travis Hunter when watching him, and where does he rank for you among your receivers that you've watched?
Yeah, he's wide receiver 1 for me. He's wide receiver 1 probably because it's actually sort of tough, like in my mind, to remove the fact that he is probably CB1 as well. Like he's just so good that like he's going to end up being my number 1 receiver just because of the value he brings. But he also just had an awesome game. He's such a football player. Like amazing hands, great game sense. I made a cut up of it, and I said that you can really see his understanding of defense come through in the way that he plays offense, the way he like settles things down. He uses like pacing in his route running to get open when like he knows his quarterback is going to get to his hitch, the way he tracks deep balls, the way he finds balls in space. He has soft hands. Like I could go on forever. He's just like such a football player. I'd be interested to hear, did you have any, like, when I was going over him, I was having a hard time finding a comp for him, and I settled on one that I thought was all right, but I find that whenever I'm doing comps, I end up picking players that are, like, all Hall of Famers. So I'm like,
Yeah.
It's a little bit tough. But I said that I thought Travis Hunter had, like, a lot of Chad Johnson in this game.
Interesting. I like that one.
I think he, like, has a good understanding of how to get open, and at the catch point, I thought he was awesome.
Yeah, I really like that comp. I just think he's so naturally talented. Like, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, he's so naturally good at everything, and you could tell he's somewhat new to the position. Like, I still think there's things he needs to learn. And granted, like, I think that, like, just playing both corner and wide receiver only can leave you to be so polished in some parts of playing wide receiver because of how detailed of a position it is. My comp for him was Garrett Wilson. Like, I think they're similar body types, similar play style. The thing that I was surprised with Travis Hunter the most, like, obviously he's this unbelievable athlete, super fast, natural ball skills, the separation ability is there, but really, like, how good he is with the ball in his hands. I mean, he is one of the only receivers, I think, in this class that can take, like, a little dump off 60 yards to the house. Like, whenever there's a daylight of space, he can just exploit it and make explosive plays with the ball in his hands. That was one of the best traits for him that stuck out to me. The thing what's weird with him, though, Luke, is like I still think like he freelances a lot with his routes because Colorado kind of gives him the ability to do that. And I don't think that he can play both positions in the NFL. Like, I think he's either going to have to choose receiver or be a corner that plays like 10 or 15 snaps of offense because like he just kind of like is not all over the place with his routes, but nothing's consistent. It really feels like he just really does what he can to get open. The ability is there. I think that like he can eventually become an amazing route runner, an amazing detailed player. I don't think he was really able to do that because there was so much on his plate as a player to play both sides of the ball. So I think if he chooses to be a full-time wide receiver, he could easily become a top 10 receiver in the NFL.
No doubt. Yeah, it's interesting. I think the team, like, if you wanted to draft him as just a receiver or just a cornerback, he's still a first-round prospect with both.
Oh,
but like
easy.
The upside that you get with both is so high. Like, like imagine you're a team that needs a cornerback and needs a wide receiver. Like, it's so rare that you can add like a blue chip talent to either of those positions, and then to be able to do it with both, like, makes his value so crazy that I definitely don't think there's a chance that the Bears wait to 10 and he's there. And I would be very surprised based on the way the roster is set up at the moment, in that we don't exactly need a wide receiver or a DB, at least a blue chip one, or like, one to take over those rooms. I'd be surprised if this is a guy that ends up on our roster, unfortunately. That being said, the way the Bears roster is set up now, it wouldn't surprise me if, for whatever reason, the Bears fall in love with someone, if they decide that they'd be willing to move up. I don't know if specifically that's a Travis Hunter type player, but I think the value because of what he presents in both is interesting, but I'm surprised to see what he's going to do in the NFL. Is an NFL team going to say, you can do both? You can play full-time at both positions? Because like you said, like, there's no doubt in my mind it lended to some sloppiness in the structure of their offense more often than not. There were times when I think he tried to, like, he was expecting Shedeur to, like, break out of the pocket or, like, trying to keep the play alive, or he took off or, like, left his zone or, like, abandoned his responsibility, like, too early. And it's like, I get it. But it just felt like you said, there's some polish. And if you want to get the best out of him in either position, I'd be surprised if that would benefit him to still continue to play both. but it's just so hard to look away at how good he is at both.
Oh, 100%. I mean, he's one of those players, Luke, that like if you were to trade up for any non-quarterback in this draft, it's him or Egbuka. Like they're the top two players in this draft pretty clearly to me. Like I don't think there's any other room for anybody else. Like I think they're comfortably better than Mason Graham, who I know some people have in this territory. And I just think Travis Hunter is like one of the most special athletes we've ever seen come out of college. And, you know, him being able to play both sides of the ball and winning a Heisman should tell you everything you need to know. But why don't we go on to the next guy, Tetairoa McMillan from, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Tetairoa McMillan from Arizona. Luke, where is he in your rankings, and where are you at with him as a player?
He's two. He's two for me. It's coming waves. I watched his tape and was like, okay, like I like what he does. He's got some stuff. But like you have to – I will preface this by saying I'm pretty hard on receivers that are very, very big. I'm pretty outspoken about. I don't think that it's like the RAS score. It's like if you're 6'10", like you'll get a 10 out of 10 in your RAS score. It's like I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing to be that big. And T-Mac is huge. He's a couple of cheeseburgers away from being a tight end. Like there's no doubt about it. He's like 6'5", I think, and he's like 215 pounds. But I mean, when I would go back and like see other clips and then decide, okay, I'll go back and watch the tape, man, like. He really doesn't play like he's 6'5" that size. There's a lot to really like about his game, and I've kind of got to the point where like I think value wise he's worth a top 10 pick, and I really do believe upside wise like he could end up being one of the best players to come out of this draft. I think that he has all pro type potential, and like when he's playing good, like he can absolutely be a guy that like. You need a bucket, you can go get it. Like sometimes you got to scheme a guy open, or like you put your number one corner on him. You got to wonder what happens. Like when T-Mac is playing good, like and like you're playing to his strengths. That it might not matter what cornerback in the NFL today you put on him. Like there are things that he can do to you that you almost can't stop.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think he's clearly the second best receiver in this class. I think he's got the most complete profile. And I love what you said about being too tall. I'm like, I never would have guessed that about you, Luke. It's not like it's in your bio or anything that you think 6'4" is too tall. When it actually, for our listeners, it actually is in his bio. It's literally 6'4" is too tall for a wide receiver. I know you've been hanging on that take for a while. I definitely can see where some of your concerns lie with those taller guys. But that's one thing that stood out with me with Tattoo. I think he plays very controlled. I think he's very nimble for a guy his size. I think he can change his gears pretty well, way better than you would expect for a guy who's 6'4", 220. I think he has got pretty good releases to get off the line of scrimmage. I think he shows good change of direction ability. I like his versatility to play in the slot and win quick hitting routes, those in breakers. I like all that stuff. My really only concern with him is just I really don't think he's that fast. Like I don't think long speed is great. When he's making plays down the field, guys are usually in his hip pocket. He usually has to make contested catches, and I question the ceiling there. My comp for him was T. Higgins, and I think in an ideal world he could be in a similar situation with T. Higgins where you have this like coverage gravity receiver in Jamar Chase that's literally taking all the attention. And then he's just one-on-one with guys consistently dominating and just totally taking advantage of the matchups a top-tier premier receiver could give him. Yep. Now, obviously, like that's probably not going to happen given like there's only so many of those receivers out there, and any receiver-needy team is probably going to take Tetairoa McMillan really high. But I like him. I obviously think he's one of the better players in the class, even though I think it's a weak class overall in general. But to me, I see more of like a really good number 2 receiver and maybe like a fringe tier 1 receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think when you look at his change of motion and quickness stuff, it's actually really impressive. It's one of those things that I don't think you lose a lot of because of his size, which when you get down to the red zone, like he runs those whip routes so well that it's like if you want to try and defend a slant on a 6'5" guy, 220 pounds, he's going to get open 90% of the time. And then as soon as you oversell that, he has the ability to whip route that and burn you. And it's on tape. He's got amazing catch radius. So 20 yards and in, he's already like without a doubt an NFL receiver in my mind. But the top speed, I agree. I think his top speed is probably nice for what his size is, but it's just not really an elite top speed. it's kind of one of those things that when you watch those guys that aren't the fastest, but they're good, like athletes will say, and they run the 40, and you just see them starting to pick up speed so fast. You're like, oh, okay, maybe they are faster than they are. But if you need him to reach that speed quickly and get over top, like you almost need to give him the runway to do it. So it's like, it's tough. Like sometimes he would run those deep digs and he'd catch it and he'd be able to get to the corner faster than you and run away from you. But it's like you needed to give him 15 yards to get up to that top speed. So that can limit him. But I think like still the upside and like some of like his ball skills are incredible. Like you can tell that his stuff after the catch too. Like he's hard to tackle and like I said, he can get up to that top speed. He's a savvy route runner. He's straight up just a great route runner. He uses his hands at the top of his routes well. Mm-hmm. Like you said, he can shut it down and change direction and go from like quick to slow like pretty well. It's fairly impressive stuff. If he was a little bit faster, I think T. Higgins would have been like my comp for him. I said Plaxico Burress.
That's a good comp. You're pulling out the names here, dude. Like, you're pulling out like the throwbacks.
Plax Burress was my favorite comp that I had this year because I just thought that fit so good for his game, and it was honestly one of those things where I was like, you know what, let me go watch some Plax Burress comp like tape and see what it was like, and I was like, yeah, this is kind of the guy that you're getting. And I think if you want to make a fair comparison, if he ends up being like a Plax Burress type career, that would make sense. I think high end, he could end up being like a T. Higgins guy, like a number one receiver, going to get 30 to 40 million a year type stuff. But like I said, the only real limiting thing is I'm not exactly sure if he's going to get that top speed.
Yeah, that's definitely my concern with him as well. Again, this is not someone the Bears are going to be considering at 10. I still like Rome as a prospect a little bit better than Tetairoa McMillan, but still, I think he's a very good prospect. I think he'd be a first round in almost every draft. The next guy on our list, who I honestly think is like a poor man's Tetairoa McMillan, is Jayden Higgins of Iowa State. Luke, what are your thoughts on Jayden Higgins? He's kind of polarizing. I feel like some people really don't like him. I don't know. Are you a fan of his?
I am a fan of his. Honestly, it's obviously Travis Hunter at 1 for me, and it's obviously Ted McMillan at 2 for me. And then after that, like the 3 spot is a toss-up from a lot of guys. And I bet he was probably pretty similar from you, anywhere from like 3 all the way down to like, we have 15 guys. We have 15 guys listed here. I would say there's probably 6 or 7 guys that I think could compete for that number 3 spot. And I think Jayden Higgins is totally one of those guys. Like you watch the Jayden Higgins tape, you're going to love the way this guy plays football. Like there's not a whole lot that he can't really do. And then he went to the combine and had one of the best combines of all time. So it's one of those things where you liked it, and then you see the combine stuff, and you're like, okay, maybe I loved it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was not a huge fan of his when I watched him initially, and I think that was because of how Iowa State shot their all 22s. But he like deserved my attention after the combine. And I was watching Jalen Noel, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna keep watching him. And I ended up really liking him. I ended up seeing what other people saw. I think I just watched the wrong games, like the wrong usage in some of the games that I watched. He's awesome off the line of scrimmage, maybe the best guy in terms of his routes and releases. He creates so much separation early in the route. He does. He really does float. I mean, it's really, really smooth. I love his versatility to be able to be a big slot receiver or win on the outside. Just destroys press coverage. He's very good on in breakers. He's very good on outbreakers too. Again, kind of like Ted, I don't think he has great long speed. He's not going to win by stretching the field vertically. He's going to make more contested catches, kind of like exactly like Ted McMillan, but he makes the contested catches. He has one of the best contested catch conversion rates of this wide receiver class. I would be more sold on him as one of the best power slots in the class if he was a better yards after the catch receiver. I thought he just kind of went down too early on contact.
I agree.
And that wasn't really a creative part of his game. But still, like if you want a possession, chain moving type, Michael Thomas type of receiver, he's one of the best options this class has to offer.
Yeah. I think his ability at the catch point and like the softness of his hands and contested catches, I think he was probably a little bit worse than Ted McMillan, but I think that he's probably a little bit quicker and faster than Ted McMillan. And it's like, okay, so that's kind of a picture poison. I think Ted McMillan just like, I think you said it great. Like, you don't want to call anyone a poor man's anything, but they're fairly similar players. And it's like, if you're in the top 10 thinking, I have my eye on Tetairoa McMillan, you don't get him at the, likely at the start of the second round, you could probably still get Jayden Higgins and pretty happy with what they're investing.
100%. I'm right there with you. All right, this guy, the next guy we're going to be talking about, is totally strays away from either receiver that we talked about. He was one of the toughest evaluations in this class as a whole, and I feel like I'm totally against the consensus. And I think you may be a little. I don't want to speak for you, Luke, because we talked about him before we hopped out of here. That is my alma mater, Mizzou, Missouri's Luther Burden, the former 5-star recruiting prospect. Now was talked about as one of the top draft prospects in this class. He seems to be falling down boards a bit in the eyes of major draft analysts. What were your thoughts on Missouri's Luther Burden?
It's funny. This is a funny case where I think he was pretty much pegged as that 3 receiver. I think for like the last 4 or 5 months, basically, people have kind of looked at it like Travis Hunter, Ted McMillan, and Luther Burden, like the 3 guys. And then he went out and had an awesome combine. And for whatever reason, I think he's kind of started to fall down like in the public perception, which is pretty rare to be like a pretty high-touted guy and then have a great combine and be that case. But I think it's probably a mix of a lot of people having combines that boosted their draft stock more. And like the season coming to an end, Luther Burden was a big name, but now you had some chances to dig into some other guys and maybe like you found out those grades weren't too far away as you'd expect, but that's kind of where I landed with Luther Burden. Like I said, after Travis Hunter and Ted McMillan, that 3 spot kind of gets a little bit of foggy for me, and I don't know if outright Luther Burden I think is better than the rest of this class. He's a possession receiver. You know, he doesn't have a. You know, my notes are all like good things, like great balance, good yak, tough to bring around, good ball skills, fast, moves well. But like I wasn't sure if any of that stuff was elite. And it's like, you know, it's hard to find yourself on a roster. You got to have yourself a role. And it's like, if you draft a Luther Burden, he's not going to be your number 1 receiver right off the hop. He just isn't. And it's like, okay, so what is his role on your team going to be? And, you know, it wasn't exactly obvious to me. And we'll get into some of the other guys too, but I just kind of thought there were other guys on this list that have very similar games that if where you think you got to get Luther Burden is somewhere in the first round, but some of these other guys would be there too. Like, it pushes Luther Burden down the board, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of what you said is very fair. I think this wide receiver class really came to play at the combine and really showed that they're better athletes than I think a lot of people thought initially. And I think, as time goes on and you get to more receivers, you just naturally, some guys who are hyped up very early into the year are going to get pushed down the board because you're just getting your eyes on more prospects. It's okay to change your takes. It's okay to change your rankings. It's a very fluid process, but so we probably should have talked about a little bit about what we're looking for in receivers when we evaluate these guys. And a huge thing for me is, can you create your own yards? Whether that's before the catch as a route runner, with you creating separation, with you creating open throws, or after the catch, right? And how you create positive yards in space. I think those are huge separating factors of what makes the receiver the best receivers in the NFL. So when you look at Luther Burden, when I'm looking with the lenses of how I'm grading him, he is in such a manufactured role, like where Mizzou does so much to get him the ball, and he doesn't really have to create his own yards before the catch, right? He's in the backfield. He's getting jet sweeps. He's getting pump screens.
Yeah.
He's behind stacks every single time. Like, they're doing so much. They're putting him in the slot. They're making sure that he avoids press coverage, and he's just an easy target for this. He's the easy button of the offense, where he's not really doing a whole lot to create that production. And I have numbers to back it. Only 91 snaps on the outside the past 2 years, right? In his best years at Mizzou, only 91 snaps he played on the outside. That is very, very low. And why I think like seeing a receiver and what they can do on the outside is so important is testing very much what I said. What's so crucial for these wide receivers? Can you win against one-on-one coverage? Can you run
get a bucket?
Can you get a bucket in the end zone third down when you're going up against man coverage?
Scheme you up behind 2 guys, behind traffic, and out in space.
Yes, exactly. And I'm not saying he can't do that. I just have so many questions on whether or not he can do that, because they never asked him to do that. Even the routes he runs down the field, they're like clear out routes from the slot. They're like seams or corner routes into space. Like, he's not really having to beat guys one-on-one with breaking routes. And the fact that they went through all that they did to kind of avoid for him to do that, like, is that like an actions are speaking louder than words? Like, do they think he can't do that, right? There's very much an outcome where it was like A.J. Brown in college, who I think had a very similar role at Ole Miss, but obviously was a way better receiver than Ole Miss was allowing him to be.
Brian Thomas. My notes for Brian Thomas are like, can this guy run things other than digs, comebacks, and goes?
Another great example. Example.
Yes. Can. And it's I actually commented this, like I was talking, I shouldn't say I was talking, but I messed up because I tweeted one of the guys at PFF, and I was like, how much in the evaluation process is, what you did and what you were asked to do? So it's like, can Luther Burden go be that guy that goes and gets you by it? Maybe. We didn't have enough opportunities to like evaluate him doing and being successful at that. So he do it consistently.
For sure. And I don't want that to take away from what he does really well. I think he's one of the most dynamic players in the class with the ball in his hands. He's awesome at breaking tackles, forcing missed tackles. I think Q, our guy, he does a great job at showing. He makes kind of a model for us and shows how each receivers rank in some of these very important categories. And I think in terms of forced missed tackles per reception, Luther Burden was the best receiver in the class the past 2 years. And there are roles where teams will manufacture you touches. Like, I'm not saying that's not valuable. It's just, if you're going to be talked about in the top 20, okay, then is when I start to have that conversation. It's like, okay, is what you're offering with it, let's say he just is what he is, and this is what you're going to have to do for him in the NFL. Is that worth a top 20 pick? That's where I have my reservations, right? So I liked him, obviously. Like, I think he's very talented. I just wasn't expecting his role to be as gimmicky as it was. And I think there's a lot more room for bust potential because we've seen guys like Laviska Shenault. We've seen the countless examples of these gadget guys not working out in the NFL. And I'm not saying he's fully on that side of the spectrum, but there definitely is more possibilities he could be that than I was initially thinking. As a Mizzou guy who watched him all the time, it really took to the All-22s to fully kind of get a grasp of how Mizzou used him.
Yeah, and it's tough because, you can think, all right, well, maybe he is that guy. Maybe we do need to kind of scheme him up. And you can think, if that's the case, you can look at someone like a Deebo Samuel and say, there's a role for that in the NFL. But if they don't go to that spot, like it could get really bad for them professionally pretty quickly. So I think you and I both agree that, it's tough. It's tough. I love his game. Like I said, like when the ball was in his hands, he really is one of the more dynamic guys in this class, but it just feels like he could be a high ceiling guy, but the floor can be pretty low too.
I totally agree. The next guy, I'm really curious to talk about him more at length with you, because I was like, okay, I'm not sure what I'm missing. Like I didn't mean that in a negative context.
I know, I saw your tweet, so I was like, okay. I thought me and you were gonna have a similar opinion because, like, we were going over Luther Burden last night, and then you were like, okay, what do you think about Jalen Royals? And I saw your tweet and was like, maybe I'm missing something. And I had literally just finished watching him and was like, okay, cool, because I wasn't the biggest fan of his tape. I shouldn't really say that. I actually really did like his tape, but I liked it in a lot of the same ways I liked Luther Burden's.
Yeah.
Like, I thought like a lot of it was manufactured. I actually maybe thought the downfield route running was a little bit better for Jalen Royals. Like, I thought some of his outbreaking stuff was like some pretty savvy stuff. But he feels like a very similar player. And like, if you look at, it's so funny, look at their measurements. It's actually, I didn't like think about that, but almost identical type players.
Yeah.
And they play really similar too. Like, well, I'll defer to you because, if I say that they're similar, we just went over Burden, all the ifs and buts about it. But tell me what you thought of Washington.
So he's in a very similar, like a gimmick in different ways. It's a very gimmicky offense. It's kind of like the Tennessee offense where the splits are super wide. Guys are lined up like literally like inches away from the sideline, just like ridiculous, like spread out formations. He primarily plays on the outside as an outside receiver, which I think is misusing him, honestly. I think he's going to move more inside, be more of a flanker type, not the X receiver they were using him to be. And yes, I think the best things he offers are yards after the catch, his ability with the ball in his hands, making people miss. I did see some potential as an outside route runner, though, like the ability to beat press. Like, there are reps where he's able to shake free and kind of use his speed to turn guys around, just uses his explosiveness because he's super explosive. Not only did he run a 4.42 at 205 pounds, but he had like a 1.49 10-yard split, which was a great number for him. So I thought there was a little more chops as a route runner that he showed off. But his route tree was so simplistic on the outside. He runs like 4 different routes. Like, it's super basic stuff. And you wonder, like, okay, if you transition him to maybe more of a slot receiver. Does he have the quickness and fluidness to be a better slot receiver than he had to be, or be, I guess, more precise route runner in the slot versus what they were asking him to do on the outside? I don't know if he's super fluid. I don't know if he's like ever going to be a great route runner and separator, but I did think there was potential paired with the speed he's able to show down the field when he runs vertically and the after the catch ability that got me really, really intrigued. So I actually like him slightly better than Luther Burden, but I do think they're similar kind of players.
Yeah. It reminds me of a couple of years ago. I was pretty high on Parker Washington. My thought around Parker Washington was kind of like if you ever played Mario Party or something of the like. Every time you pick the character Mario, he's got like an 80% in every category.
Yeah,
but he's not really amazing at any one thing. And it's kind of the way I felt about Jalen Royals, and it was like kind of the way I felt about Luther Burden. And when I was looking at my notes from a couple of years ago, it was like the notes I had about Parker Washington, who's had some nice stuff with the Jags, but it's like, again, if you're trying to find a role in the team, you got to be great at something. And it wasn't unless you're going to be like a number one. So it wasn't evident to me like what stuck out with either of those guys. It just felt like they were kind of good at everything they did, but it was like, how would you define them as a role on the team? So it was tough. I think I'll probably end up with like a second round grade on both those guys.
Yeah, that's exactly where I have them. I have them like fringe second round, fringe third round types. Yeah. And again, that doesn't reflect where I think they're going to get drafted. This class is obviously a weaker class. That's just kind of the value I see them. I think they're more complementary skill sets is basically what those grades mean. I can honestly see Jalen Royals being a potential option for the Bears. He may be too redundant for DJ Moore. I think they honestly have similar skill sets.
Yeah.
He may be like a poor man's version of DJ Moore. But I do like what he showed. Like if he's able to get free releases, he can stretch the field pretty damn well. It's when he has to deal with contact and like beating press on the outside. He's not as fast down the field, but there are a couple reps where he just strides past people. And he's another one of those guys, kind of like Travis Hunter, where if you give that guy daylight, he's gone, man. Like
I agree. Totally. Yeah. When they would get the ball in his hands, probably more than Luther Burden as well. And he could hit a hole that was like open. He really did turn it on. It was like, okay, like that was some juice. But and maybe this was my issue with him is I felt like you didn't see that top speed as much in his route running. It felt like it was a ball in his hand type thing.
I totally agree. That was probably my concern with him, but I do like him. I'm probably higher on him the most. And I kind of got vibes with Sky Moore. Anyone who knows me, I whiffed hard on Sky Moore, and I'm getting a little bit of vibes of like how I'm straying from consensus with the Jalen Royals. But let's move on to the next.
Does that give you like a little bit of like PTSD where you're
like, dude, it was totally. I forgot who I messaged. I was like, someone set me straight here. Like, am I going crazy?
Is this just another one?
PTSD.
But I think the DJ Moore comparison is good because, like, to that same point, like if someone asks you what is DJ Moore amazing at, you'd say, run out of the catch stuff. Without a doubt, it's the stuff that you love about Burden and Jalen Royals. But it's like after that, it's like what is he amazing at? And it's like DJ Moore is like there's pretty much not one thing that you would ask a receiver to do that he's not good at, but like what is he great at? And it's like okay, well, if you're gonna be good at everything, like his projection for like success in the NFL would be something like a DJ Moore role.
Most definitely. I think they're very similar. I think they're both like flankers in an ideal world.
Yeah.
Why don't we move on to the next guy on this list? Luke, sorry. I called you my co-host. I called you Snyder.
We're slightly co-hosting.
Why don't we move on to the next guy who's also a Jaylin, who I honestly think of all the guys we talked about, he probably is who I would think a guy that's going to be on the Bears radar the most of any of the guys we talked about. And that is Jaylen Noel, another Iowa State guy, receiver opposite of Jayden Higgins. What were your thoughts on Jaylen Noel? I think it's Noel. I don't think it's pronounced Noel. I think it's Jaylen Noel.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I have probably been saying that wrong. And I think this is one of the guys we haven't talked about. So this will be a fun one. I'm pretty high on Jaylen Noel.
Okay.
I like him, man. Like it's pretty hard for me to find a whole ton about his game that I don't like. Like he's legit fast and he's legit quick. Like he gets at the top speed quickly and he like his stride length. Like when like if you need him to run a deep post, like he's gonna run away from you. Like you really need to. He's the type of player that I think you really do need to respect that speed. But like he's also really quick, and I love his release package. And I think his change of direction is great. And I think he's got really like soft, natural hands. And I'm like, the more I was watching him, I was like trying to find some reason to have him farther down the list or like closer to where everyone else probably has him rated. And, 5'10", 180 maybe is a little undersized, but not that much for the modern NFL. And like, I think to your point, like when you look at like what we imagine the Bears are missing currently on their roster, based on what we think Ben Johnson's offense is going to look like, it's probably like a really like pure speed guy or like a really pure slot guy. And like, man, I look at his game and think, why couldn't Jalen Noel kind of do both?
Yeah, I think he's one of the best vertical slot receivers in this. He's probably the best vertical slot receiver. And just honestly, in general, like in terms of a guy who could stretch the field from a slot alignment or inside alignment that can just kind of run through a defense, one of the best players in the class at that. It's funny, Luke. So one of my first projects at Mizzou was during COVID, and we wanted to do a story about recruiting during COVID and how it was different and like how the process was different. And I actually talked to Jalen Noel. I talked to him about that process, and I had no idea that like he had NFL aspirations. And obviously I knew Iowa State was firmly in the mix during that time. And it's cool to see where he's at now. He was an awesome guy, very, very nice guy, very, very helpful for my story and my project, giving me all the nuggets of information that he did. So I can vouch for him in that he's an awesome guy. I think he's going to do great things in the NFL. In terms of a player, I think you're spot on. I think he's very clean with his route running. The one thing I didn't think he was small, but I did think he kind of plays small. I think when guys are able to reroute him and get hands on him, he does get affected pretty not drastically, but pretty noticeably. Like he slows down, he can get bumped off his route. His timing can be thrown off, and then he just doesn't really offer much after the catch. I mean, his yards after the catch numbers or his forced missed tackle numbers kind of reflect what you see on tape. He doesn't really give you much in that regard. But in terms of a speedy option that maybe will be around in round 3 that the Bears are looking for, I can definitely see him being very, very appealing for them.
Yeah, he got tackled pretty easily. We've been a couple of guys that we mentioned, like, we wish that there were so many plays that he broke one more tackle. Like, they were huge plays. And that isn't to say, I think he had like 1,200 yards last year. So it's not like he didn't get hit. But he was fairly easy to tackle. I think that's why when you look at it, too, like, his receiving efficiency, that's a pretty, base stat. His wasn't the greatest. But, like, he's another guy, too, that every year, like, there's a couple of those guys that go to the Senior Bowl and have like a moment and then jump up a little bit. And he looked really great at the Senior Bowl when they were doing a lot of those one-on-one drills. Like those were kind of one of the things I was looking for. Was like, how's this guy getting enough press? And I thought his ability to laterally move on the line, to avoid even being touched, was actually pretty good. The problem is there is not a ton of film, but there's enough film to say that when he does get touched, he's slightly in trouble, and that makes sense. He's 5'10", 184, soaking wet, whatever they say. But if like the value's right, 3rd or 4th round, like it wouldn't surprise me at all if Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles look at him and say, "There's a lot of the stuff we want to do on offense that this guy can do."
100%. I think he's a way better version of what they wanted Tyler Scott to be. I think he's way more fluid. When it's on, when he can just separate cleanly and not have to deal with contact, it's as pretty as anybody in the class. And like
seriously, there's some deep stuff that he like completely leaves guys in a different area code.
100%. I really like him. I'm glad I liked him because I got to meet him, and awesome dude. I could definitely see him fitting in culturally too with the Bears. Why don't we keep churning through this?
You like this next guy too.
Yeah, I'm like I don't even know what to think of this guy.
Okay,
I did do his cut up if you guys want to check that out. But that is Tre Harris of Ole Miss. My friend went to Ole Miss and is obviously a huge Ole Miss football fan, and like routinely told me to check out Tre Harris. And I did like him. He's kind of a polarizing player, but I'm really curious, Luke, because I have no idea where you're at on him. What were your thoughts on Tre Harris?
I don't know if it's like something that's got to do with wearing the Ole Miss jersey, but for some reason, anytime like I see someone or watch their tape, it's hard for me to like not like think about like an AJ Brown style game. And I don't he's a little bit smaller than him, but I thought it was a very similar type game. Like I thought he used his body well to keep people off of him. Yes. I think underneath he's a bit of a beast, and deep, like he has really savvy like last second adjusting to like keep himself open and beat people at that like catch point. He's got strong hands. He's like pure X receiver, which is fine. I think a 4.54 like is pretty much exactly what, if you watch the tape, what you'd expect. He's not really going to run away from you, but that's not exactly his game. Like there's other guys on the team for that. I liked it. Like you kind of came on hot with Tre Harris a couple of weeks ago when you were first starting to watch him, and I was like, maybe I do need to watch this guy more because he wasn't even really on my radar. I was pleasantly surprised. Like he kind of like earned himself for me into that like one tier down from the Tet McMillan and Travis Hunter guys. Now, having my rewatch of him, I was a little bit less like excited about it and was like, okay, he's probably closer to that like 7 to 8 spot, maybe even more considering how much I like this class. But like just a classic X receiver.
Yeah, he's currently wide receiver 8 for me. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think he's in like, I have like obviously Travis Hunter, Tet McMillan in their own tier. Then I have an next tier. He's in that next tier right after the second one. I totally agree with your assessment. He is an X receiver all the way. Play him on the line of scrimmage, play him outside, let him beat up on press coverage one-on-one. The thing is, Luke, I thought he played faster than he ran. Like I wasn't expecting him like running the 4.3s or anything like that. But there are times if you let him build up speed, he'll stride away from guys. Like, and I think like the press coverage element doesn't slow him down at all. Like he's just big and he can run through that. It doesn't really
you shouldn't even really like don't try and get your hands on him.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I liked about him the most. Like his releases in close quarters are awesome. Like he can, he can avoid contact. He can win quickly with slants and stuff like that. Really the big thing with him is like don't have him run routes where he's stopping at all. Just let him continue to run. That's where he's at his best.
Slants, post, digs.
Yep, all of that. I totally agree. That's where he's at his best. And I honestly thought like he was pretty hard to get down when he's built up ahead of steam. I think he's like really shifty at all? No, I don't think like Yak's going to be a huge part of his game, but there are elements of what you like about, okay, he can take a slant like 40 yards, like if you give him space to do so. I think the building
he can be a deep receiver for you because I agree. He probably did play a little bit faster than 4.54.
For sure.
Maybe a little bit levels, but like you want to throw the back shoulder room, you can. You want to throw it over the shoulder, you can. Like he's good at like he's kind of got that Ohio State thing, which I also think is something that's really good about AJ Brown, and that when he wants to, when you should be body catching it and keeping your frame away from people, he's good at that. And when he wants to catch it outside of his frame, he's like he does an alligator arm things. It was one of the things I really didn't like about Quentin Johnson is you never saw on tape him like extending to catch the ball.
Yep.
Sometimes you'll see Tre Harris like do that body catch, but it's like really nuanced, like keeping people off his body. If he needs to go up and stab it and be high with it, he can. Like I think he's a pretty savvy football player. I just think it's almost like another guy we're going to get to on the list. He's coming up next. It almost felt like Matt Golden, where it was like I like this tape, but then Matt Golden went and ran a 4.29, and I was like, okay, wait, maybe I love this tape. Where Tre Harris liked his tape, ran the 4.54, and I was like, okay, that's just kind of who this guy is. He's an X receiver.
Yeah, the thing with him though, what was weird is like I did not think I thought he was a fine contested catch receiver, but like the results were better than the process. Like I agree, like he lays out for passes and he can catch them like while extending. He doesn't go up and attack the football though. Like there's not a whole lot of reps where he's like catching the ball over guys, which is strange for a guy who's like 6'3", 210 X receiver. Like you don't think like that. So I don't know if he'll be as successful like with what he's doing now, if that's how he's going to want to win. I think he adjusts to the ball really well, and he has some crazy like highlight reel level catches. I didn't see a guy who was super comfortable attacking the ball, I guess is what I thought was maybe the biggest difference. But he's definitely not Quentin. Like I think I agree with what you said. Like he's definitely not Quentin Johnson level bad at contested catches. That guy can't catch with anyone in his area code. I don't know. Do you think he's someone that the Bears consider? Maybe not with him running what he did. I don't. Again, he's maybe a little bit redundant from what you get with a Rome Odunze, and I think Rome's a much better version of that. He's also been a guy who's been consistently injured. I don't necessarily know if he's going to be someone the Bears go after.
No, it doesn't. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. I think that I think honestly the comparison to Rome Odunze is great. I think everything you liked about Rome Odunze coming out, I think Rome Odunze did better than what Tre Harris does. Dang, the same size. Rome's going to be faster. Rome's a way better route runner. Rome has way better hands. Like he's way better with the ball in his hands. But the problem is I really shouldn't say way better because he's better. But like Tre Harris has a lot of that stuff. Nice. And he probably won't ever be like
I think Luke cut out here, but I think I know what he was about to say, and that he'll never probably be a wide receiver one. I don't, Luke. I think you're back now.
Yeah.
I didn't want to speak for you, but I
Exactly.
don't think he'll ever be a wide receiver one. My comp for him was Martavis Bryant. Like I think he's that kind of player.
Great, love that.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next guy because you brought him up, and I think he's shot up boards. I mean, he's wide receiver one for a lot of major draft analysts.
Totally.
Which is, it's pretty shocking. That is Matthew Golden of Texas, the Houston transfer. He comes in at 5'10", 191 pounds. Everyone's going to know he was the 40 heard around the world this year. He comes in and runs a 4.29, which no one was expecting him to run that fast. He only runs 140. He wasn't even expecting it to run that fast. What are your thoughts on Matthew Golden, Luke?
Like, man, it's hard to watch this game and really not like pretty much all that you see. Like, the way that they used him, like, at the Texas offense was fun, but like great deep threat on a team full of great deep threat. Like he's a hands catcher that can fully go up and get you the ball, and he loves to go up and get it. Like even sometimes like doing digs and like comebacks and stuff where you probably should stay grounded so that your next move is important. He would still.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Luke's assessment, though. Like, I think he's got some of the best ball skills in the class, and you wouldn't expect that from like the speedy deep threat that Texas kind of used him to be. The big thing with me with Matthew Golden is that the 4.29 speed, you see that he's fast. I never question whether or not he was slower at all. Like, I didn't think he was like that was a limitation of his game. But I never saw 4.29 speed. I still think he's very comfortable as a deep threat. He's very good at tracking the ball. He just kind of has a feel for getting behind the defense. And I'm wondering too, like Quinn Ewers left him out to dry a lot, like underthrown balls, way overthrown balls. I wonder if he like didn't want to overshoot. Like he was kind of adjusting his speed to the quarterback, and there is an extra gear on the field that maybe we didn't see. But I do think that like he's probably the best deep threat in the class. I just don't know if the Bears aren't going to consider him where he's probably going to get drafted. Yeah, that's kind of my assessment. Again, I think, Luke, there's some connection issues, so I don't want to stick on the receivers. We got to get through them. If Luke comes back, we will definitely talk through Matthew Golden more. I will keep this list churning. The next guy on the list is Tez Johnson, who I think had the complete opposite I guess he kind of fell down boards after the combine versus what Matthew Golden did. And the real reason why Tez Johnson fell down the draft boards is he comes into the combine at 154 pounds, was the lightest receiver to ever weigh in at the combine. And I think people were okay with that if he ran fast, right? Or if he was a good athlete. And he comes in and runs a 4.51, which in this receiver class was honestly one of the more disappointing times. So I think any hope he had of going in maybe like round 3, because this Tez Johnson, I'll talk about his game shortly, but was a very productive player. There definitely were a lot of things to like. It's just when you look at the physical projections on some of these guys and how they project to the NFL, there aren't a whole lot of guys who are 154 pounds who are running a 4.51 that stick around. Like you're just a physical outlier at that point. So teams aren't going to take that chance on you until later in the draft. But when I watched Tez Johnson, I never really thought he was that fast. He didn't really win primarily as a vertical receiver. What he does best is quick underneath separation, yards after catch, create yards that way. He's really good in like from the slot, being able to attack defenders in space. Like that's where he's at his best. Option routes, choice routes. And I think there's a role for him in the NFL as a wide receiver 3. Now, he tries his ass off as a blocker, but is he going to give you much there? Probably not, because he's only 154 pounds. But Luke, I did think that there was something to Tez Johnson's game. Like if he was available in like round 4 or 5 and the Bears are still looking for that wide receiver 3, he kind of reminded me of Tank Dell, someone I'd take in that range of the draft. Yeah. IQ, I think you're on mute.
I muted when I was trying to unmute. There we go. So I think, what did Tank Dell run though? Like, was he like a 4.5 or?
So yeah, he did run in the 4. I think he ran a 4.49. And the similarities with Tank and Tez is that they both had great 10-yard splits, and that is kind of their game in a nutshell. They are explosive, short. the speed kind of dies out on them the more they have to run. So yeah, I just think that like, again, short, intermediate, that's kind of the more the vision I had with Tez Johnson, which is weird to say for a guy who's 154 pounds. You're probably thinking speedster when you hear that.
Yeah. Am I good? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. I agree. Like, I think when I look at Tez Johnson, first of all, you don't want to let a 40 deter you from what you saw on the field. And like anytime that Tez Johnson was playing, man, he was the fastest guy in the field. He moved differently than the people around him. But like that size is just, I don't know if I would be able to bring myself to be the team that drafts him unless it's like we're like 5th round or below.
Mm-hmm.
Like
yep.
I just look at like some of the littler guys that have played in the NFL, and like you look at, I think Tank Dell, is like the obvious comparison as of late, like the classic, insanely quick slot guy, good top speed. Even though he ran the 4.51, I'm not going to stop saying he's got good top speed. But man, like just a ton of injury concern, and
Yes.
Tez Johnson is like considerably smaller than Tank Dell was. Like 154 doesn't even really make sense. People were thinking about, where do you draft Jordan Addison, and Jordan Addison was 20 pounds heavier than Tez Johnson.
Yeah, it's crazy how light he is, and that's a great point to bring up, Luke. Like everyone's like, "Oh, look at Tank Dell, like he did fine." Like, well, like the injuries, like obviously it's very unfortunate, but like that's a concern when you're taking guys this little. That's why there's not a whole lot of guys from lighter than Tutu Atwell. Yeah, like there's not a whole lot of guys that stick around at this weight. Like I know that smaller receivers are being incorporated more in the NFL, but this is like outlierly small. But again, if he's there around 5. This guy's a baller. I like him. Like there's something to his game. I would take that chance in like round 4 or 5. It's just probably not going to go where other people thought he was going to go earlier in the draft.
Yeah, it's tough. I think a good way to think about it is if you watch his tape, he's an awesome football player.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it. But the issues are what you see right on your screen right now. No one else on that list has as much red as he does.
There you go. You're spot on. Yeah, Cole Beasley. That's not a bad comparison. I can see them being used similar ways in the NFL. Luke, I'm really curious to get your opinion on the next guy. I think he's very polarizing to me, but it seems like everyone's on board with drafting this guy in round 1. That is Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State.
Yep.
He's been there for like 4 years. This is a guy that's like, is he going to declare? Is he not? He finally declares this year. What are your thoughts on Egbuka?
Like he's an Ohio State receiver. Like he's such an Ohio State receiver.
Yes.
He is 6 foot, 200 pounds, like completely savvy, like great hands, really nuanced, understands the game. Like if you're in zone, like he's really going to put you in trouble because he understands how to settle into it really well. He can beat man if it's like 15 yards and under with his route running. I don't know if he's ever gonna run away from someone. But it's like, the things that you loved about Jackson Smith and Jigba are all probably true of Emeka Egbuka as well. And like the stuff that you love about Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave is probably true as well. My only issue is I'm not sure that he's the level of athlete that they were. I think he might be a touch slower and a touch less quick than them in almost all those categories. Like literally just a touch, but like that touch matters. And I think like that's kind of how I view him as a prospect. Like I would take like that prototype, that guy, and like maybe bump it down. So to me, like he would probably be like a 2nd round prospect.
I'm totally agree with you. Like I like him. I think the diet version of the guys that you listed off is a very accurate assessment of his game. Like I think he's smooth, good route runner, 0 to 15 yards, like reliable hands, has some of the best like drop numbers in the class. Like he doesn't drop the ball that often. Yep. He's just reliable, is where he needs to be, can beat press coverage, short and intermediate. I just don't see like a skill that really separates him into the 1st round. Like
exactly.
There are a lot of guys like that in this class, like Jayden Higgins. We're going to talk about Jack Bech, Xavier Restrepo. Like I think that like there's not that big of a gap from him and those other guys that can be a slot receiver, good route runner, reliable. I don't know why he's being talked about as this lock to go in round 1. And I thought maybe that would be because he's a good blocker when he's really not that good of a blocker. Like he gets pushed around he doesn't really like try to the level that I'd want him to. And he gets pushed around a lot. And then the thing with him too, is like for slot receivers specifically, I really value your yards after the catch ability. And he's just not very good yards. He goes down pretty easily. Like he can make
it's
people
a good
miss.
point.
Yeah, but he doesn't break tackles at all. So I don't know. I like him. I think he's a fine player. Don't get me wrong. I just don't see maybe the round one prospect that other people do.
Yeah, he's going to end up with a similar grade to me as Burden and Royals. Like, I think the things that you love about Burden and Royals are all pretty true with Emeka Egbuka as well, but it's like you substitute the yak stuff for route running.
Yes, that's perfectly said. I totally agree with you. I'm gonna give you the floor here with the next guy because this is your guy. And this was the last guy I watched.
Yeah.
Xavier Restrepo.
I don't know.
Go.
He's gonna end up pretty close to that 3 or 4 spot for me as far as receivers in this class. Like, I'm not sitting in front of my notes now because my computer geeked out, but just loved everything about his game. Pure football player, understands the art of getting open. He is like a classic slot receiver. Like, think Julian Edelman, think Cole Beasley, think Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, if you watch the tape, there's no way you watch a game of his and don't come away thinking that guy plays the game like Amon-Ra St. Brown does. And, I don't know I think because of that, he's a little undersized. Maybe he's long speed isn't there, although I bet you he'd crush the 3-cone drill.
Yes.
I think if you're looking for a guy to play that similar role, like, I don't think there's anyone in the Bears that moves and gets open like he does right now. If you were looking for something like that Amon-Ra St. Brown role, I wouldn't be surprised if Xavier Restrepo was at the top of that list, if not pretty darn close. And because of that, I would say this is one of those guys as Bears fans you got to start and say this could be someone that could be a Bear.
He reminded me of Amon-Ra St. Brown of any of these slot receivers. And I think a lot of that is because, like, while you said he's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's not the tallest guy, I should say, but he's thick. I mean, 210 pounds, right, for a guy who's like 5'10", and he looks every bit of that in the field. He does not get pushed around. He can run through defenses and take jams, and he'll run right through them, right? Like, he just is where he's supposed to be. And what I really loved about him versus some of these other slot receivers is he's doing a lot of hard things. Like, he's running crossing routes over the middle, taking shots, like laying out for passes, does all the dirty work, is not afraid to take a shot over the middle of the field. Like, he just kind of plays a fearless brand of football that really, really reminded me of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, I think, and he blocks his ass off too. They bring him into the formation. He digs out safeties and slot corners, very similar to what the Lions asked Amon-Ra St. Brown to do. So again, I think I posted it literally today. Where would they take Restrepo? Q asked a good question. I think round 3 is where to watch out for him. I literally tweeted a meme today of it was I think it was Greg Venables like stepping over the sideline onto the field, and the guy is pulling him backwards. And I was like, this is going to be Ryan Poles pulling Ben Johnson back from drafting Xavier Restrepo as high as he can, because he just reminded me of Amon-Ra St. Brown so much.
Yeah, 100%. You watch the tape and it's kind of hard to almost not make the comparison. I made the comparison and then was like, I'm tired of comparing people to the top of the market, Pro Bowlers, but like something about the way that they move. It's they move pretty hunched over in a good way. They're not very upright. They're sleek and they're slashers. And like I said, and like to your point, I would be surprised if this guy wasn't pretty high up the Bears list.
Most definitely. So here's a diet comparison of Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think Khalil Shakir was a good one because both those guys make tough catches and were pretty decent after the catch. Prime Hunter Renfrow, I could see that as well. I think that was Lance Zierlein's comp for him. I think too, like his yards after the catch numbers weren't great, but he runs such a vertical route tree where I think that kind of hurts his yards after the catch numbers in terms of forcing missed tackles. I think he's better than the numbers would suggest.
I agree. I think they asked him to do a lot of tough stuff, and he responded pretty well.
Totally agree. The next guy is I struggle with him too because there's a lot to his game that I really like, but there's just some concerning parts I can't really get over with him. That's Elic Ayomanor, the redshirt sophomore, I believe, from Stanford. He came in 6'1", 206 pounds. Luke, where are you at with Elic Ayomanor?
This guy's similar to me, not in play style, but similar to me in the thing I said about Tre Harris and the thing I said about Emeka Egbuka is that I don't know if it's because he's got a Stanford jersey on, but my evaluation of him is similar to what I had for, and now his name is escaping me. He plays on the Cardinals.
I'm trying to think.
They drafted him like 2 years ago.
Michael Wilson.
Can't remember his name. Anyway, he got drafted out of Stanford about 2 years ago, and he was injured a lot. So it was kind of a tough evaluation, but he's a pure X receiver that moves well, has good strong hands. I was impressed and ran better routes than I thought he'd run. I don't know. I don't know. He's not. I'm not so high on him. What do you think about him?
So I agree with your assessment. He's a better route runner than I thought he was. He's got good releases, can uncover quickly. He can shake guys off the line of scrimmage. He separates vertically better than I thought he would. He ran 4.44 for him. That's a really good time. I think he was a track guy. I think that was part of his background, which makes sense why he ran faster than maybe I was expecting him. I don't necessarily think
me too. I was surprised by his athletic profile. I thought he tested better than I thought he was going to.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't know if he plays that athletic, but he did know how to like stack, I guess, corners and get behind him that way. I don't think he like pulls away from them very well, but like he can get behind him, I guess, is the best way I can put it. The thing that I was hung up with me is, and this is in Q's model too, of the 30 receivers, he ranked 29th in contested target percentage, and he was really low in terms of his conversion rate in that percentage. I think I might have read that wrong, but because there's so many numbers here. But when I just watch him, the ball skills are terrible. Like he just doesn't come down with a lot of contested catches. He loses track of the ball. There's a lot of drops on his tape, a lot of easy drops. I just don't think he's a very natural catcher of the football. And for a guy who, yes, can create early separation into the route, but guys kind of make up that ground, I don't think he's ever going to be like a separation specialist. I was hoping for the ball skills and contested catch. But like there are flashes, there are, spurts of crazy highlight catches on his tape. It's just not a part of his game where he wins. And I think that's going to have to be if he's going to be a productive receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. It was kind of up and down. The receiver I was talking about was Michael Wilson.
There you go.
But it's up and down. Like the flashes are really good. Like, you could turn on the tape, the Colorado game, and he slightly took Travis Hunter's lunch.
Oh yeah. The 2 years ago, I mean, he had like a 200-yard receiving game. That game was incredible. Yeah, it was insane.
And it's like you put that tape on, and you like legitimately like that, the high end like aspects of that tape is almost like first round type prospect stuff, because he was making those tough catches and he was doing the stuff downfield. But it comes and goes. And I think the consistency for him, considering like where his high points were, he'll probably end up a little bit lower down my list. Maybe, he's in that like cluster of guys after Tet McMillan and Travis Hunter. But I would be worried that, I don't think you can teach being a great like catcher of the football. And if you don't have that, it might be something that plagues you pretty much forever.
So I totally agree. That's a hard skill to learn. The thing I'll say about him is that his quarterback did him no favors. Like he was playing with one of the worst quarterbacks of this group. So the production being affected by that, absolutely. Like I would definitely give him the benefit of the doubt there. And I will say, for Stanford being as bad as they were, the situation being as bad as they were, this dude never takes a play off. He is blocking his ass off. Probably the best blocker in the class, in my opinion. I mean, he's just looking to kill people, plays through the whistle. Like you would never know he's in such a shitty situation because of his effort and the way he plays. And I know if he does fall to the third round, maybe that's definitely going to be something the Bears consider. That seems like the receivers Ben Johnson wants on his team.
Yep, I like it.
All right. As we're winding down this list, this is one of my favorite players, Luke. My guy, Jack Bech. Let me hear your take.
This is your guy, isn't it?
I love him. I love this guy.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I mean, it's pretty hard to find a reason to not like him. You watch his tape, you're going to love it. And then, his interviews and how he performed at the Senior Bowl, you're going to love it. He ended up being the Senior Bowl MVP. Game-wise and what you'd want him to be, he's pretty similar to what we were just talking about with Elic. Like, he is your classic X receiver, but I just think he kind of does everything a little bit better. I don't think you have to worry about his hands. I think he does a really good job of sitting into his routes and getting low and changing direction. He probably doesn't have, like, amazing, like, top-end, like, speed, but he's not slow by any means.
Yeah, I was hoping that for him to run the 40, obviously, and get more, maybe like a definitive number on what he was going to run. But I think he's going to run the 40 at the pro day, so we'll see then. But yeah, he was way faster than I was expecting him to be. Like there are actually glimpses of him getting behind the defense, creating plays down the field. I mean, such a weird profile, right? He's at LSU for the first 2 years, transfers over to, if I'm not mistaken, transfers over to TCU that third year. Doesn't really do anything for those first 3 years. Like the production is way down. This year, an absolute animal in like every single category. Contested catches, amazing. The conversion rate's incredible. Easy
Drop
separation.
like none.
I love his routes. I love his releases. He's one of those receivers in this class, and I think it's just a very rare skill at the college level that he can combat contact. Like if guys try to press him, okay, he can fight you back. Like he doesn't get hung up on contact.
Oh yeah.
I really like that about his game. He plays strong through contact. He plays strong at the catch point. Way savvier than you would expect after the catch. 17 forced missed tackles this year. A really good number for him. Again, not going to be an amazing part of his game, but I think he can be in your X. I think he can be your power slot. The change of direction numbers at the combine were awesome. I don't really know what I'm missing with him. I feel like maybe I'm too high on him, but he does so much well, and he can create his own yards. He can create his own separation, and I really like that about them. So if he was to fall to the third round, this is a guy I'm running. Like this is his best player available. I'm taking this guy. He may fall because of being a late year breakout and maybe not being the best athlete. But as a complimentary receiver, man, I don't think you're going to find better options than him in this class right now. Currently, Luke, for me, he is wide receiver 4. I really like him.
Yeah, I think honestly, like he almost kind of feels like Luther Burden in that. The opposite in that, like, he's quietly but like surely like moved his way up like that list. Like tape is there. I think he interviewed well at the Senior Bowl, and then he had the Senior Bowl that he did, and then he went and had himself a great combine. And I think anybody that you would say any scouts or guys that you like to follow, like if you go and find out what they think about Jack Bech, like I feel like they're going to be pretty high on him as well. I wouldn't be surprised if consensus wise he ends up in that anywhere from like 4 to 7 range of receivers in this class, and I think that's fair. Like I was surprised to hear he had 17 broken tackles. I think that run after catch is probably the one area of his game where I'm like if you're drafting him to be a run after the catch guy, you're probably not drafting him for the right reasons. But after that, not a ton of stuff to not like about his game.
100%. I mean, yeah, I didn't think that was like a strong point of his game, but it was like gravy for me that the fact that he showed he could do that. Like he's hard to get down. I would say more so than like being super elusive. But I'm really high on him. I will let you close out with Isaiah Bond because he's the guy I've watched the least of, and I think if I'm not mistaken, you like him more than I do. So why don't you talk about Texas's Isaiah Bond?
Well, I don't know how much you like him, but I really like him. I think that, we said Xavier Restrepo is a guy that I think you probably have circled if you're the Bears as like that role for the Ayomanor type thing. I think if you're the Bears, man, you have Isaiah Bond circled for that Jameson Williams type thing. They used him exactly the same way. Almost all of his routes were deep stuff where it's like, either a straight vert or a skinny post. And then they would build off that with like these really deep outs and comebacks. And I think he ran them so well. I think he ran like the skinny post vert just as well as he ran like the deep post, like deep outs, comebacks, corners. Like I think his speed through those little breaks were as fast as him just running straight speed. And there are some clips where he runs a skinny post and there's not a guy within 30 yards of him. Like it's that kind of speed. And his 40, it says he ran a 4.39. He said going into the combine that he was going to break the record. He didn't, but he did have the fastest top speed in the 40. And it honestly looked like when he was running it, it's like this guy didn't train to run the 40. Like this guy's a football player that knew he was fast and didn't train to run the 40. When you watched Matt Golden run the 40, that looked like a dude that was running track. And when you watched Isaiah Bond run the 40, it looked like a football player that was running a 40-yard dash. So it looked like sometimes he was burning out and he lost like some momentum at certain places where I just didn't look like, Matt Golden was. But when you see him on film, his speed to his break and through his break was like completely elite. And they used him in those like the ways that they used Jameson Williams as well. Like he ran a ton of screens. He ran a ton of those like reverses and orbits and bubbles. And I think honestly, like if you're Ben Johnson, man, you could see a guy like this and really start to lick your chops. My worry about it is going to be where the rest of the NFL sees his value and where he's going to go, because it wouldn't surprise me if a guy like this ends up being a guy that goes way higher than some people expect.
I think if he would have ran faster, I get what you're saying. I do think he plays faster. He plays faster than Golden for sure. Like I think the 40 times are misleading. I think exactly what you said happened there. And I think that translates to on the field as well in terms of like Golden is locked in 100% of the time. Like Golden is playing 100 miles per hour in terms of effort. I just think there's lapses with Isaiah Bond.
Yes.
There are times where he just jogs the routes and like, I don't know, it's not giving it his all. I just didn't see a very like intense player. He's smooth when he wants to turn it on. That's the long speed's obviously there.
Yeah.
I just saw kind of an inconsistent player. I was surprised he declared. I thought he'd go back to school because he was billed. I think he was a really highly touted recruit as well, and obviously comes over from Alabama to Texas.
Yeah, so exactly. He played the year at Alabama, and honestly was really disruptive there, and then came into the same thing. But you're so right in that, like, you have to be concerned about him disappearing, not even just for like games and parts of games, but for like stretches. Like, he basically disappeared for Texas's playoff run, which is, it felt crazy to me. And he's a player that if you watch the highlights, man, you are going to fall in love with him. But then if you go in and you watch, the all 22, you're going to have more issues than if you'd watch the highlights. And like you said, like there are going to be 6 or 7 plays that he takes off per game. And, that just can't be the case if you want to be an NFL player. But I think as a deep threat in the top end speed, I actually don't know if I have anyone else as good of a deep threat as him in this class. I really do think like he's at that level of getting open and stretching the defense. And if you're thinking about that Jameson Williams profile and you want someone that even just putting them on the field is going to back their other team's safety up 5 yards, he is that kind of guy.
I totally agree with you. I think that is the most appealing part of his game, and probably something that not a lot of people in the class. This is not a very fast class. Like there are. No. I don't think it's a slow class, but like in terms of like top end speed, you're not going to find a whole lot of guys, and he's definitely one of them.
Matt Golden was the fastest 40 in this class. Like
right,
Matt Golden.
Right. You would never say that if you watched them play, but I totally thought you were spot on about like Texas just like limiting his stat. I mean, he went from in the conference championship game against Georgia, he had 30 routes. Basically, he ran 30 routes. In the Arizona State game in Ohio State, he ran 13 routes in both those games. Like they took him off the field. So like, and it just felt like they did that in stretches. Like I don't know what the disconnect was there.
Exactly. You don't know if that's something that came from the coaches or if it's something that like he did and it trickled down. But I think the 3 playoff games he played, he had a total of like 5 targets, and it's like, what?
Yeah, it was strange. It was puzzling. I don't think he's going to get drafted that high. I think he'll be there at 72 or 71, wherever the Bears draft.
Yeah.
And I could definitely see them chasing that speed if that's what they're going for. Again, like I just think like interviews and stuff like that, like kind of explaining what happened at Texas, why it wasn't that successful, is going to be super big for him. But I'll need to watch more. I definitely see the highs and why he could be appealing. But I just need to watch more before I can have my final takeaways with him.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys that I still I either haven't watched a ton or I haven't got around to watching at all. I haven't watched Savion Williams from TCU. I just watched Kyle Williams from – where is he from?
I think he's from Mizzou. From Washington State, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right. I was really impressed by his tape. So there's a couple of guys that we didn't touch on here that I think still could probably be people that the Bears target. But as far as like broad strokes, I mean, those are the guys. Those will be the top 10 prospects at the wide receiver position. We probably covered in today's video, and I think of those, there's a select handful that really, really scream Bears.
For sure, I think the guys to keep. Just to highlight them again, I think the guys to keep in mind in terms of what the Bears are looking for, if you're looking for like the power slot blocker, quick separation, intermediate chain mover types, Xavier Restrepo, Elic Ayomanor is more of an X, but I think there are elements of his game that maybe he can move into the slot. I think the Bears will just love how he plays. Like I think that will be appealing to them. So maybe him. Not Jayden Higgins. I don't think he's going to be in a range where the Bears are going to be able to take him. But Jack Bech is probably the next guy I would say in that. And then if you're looking for the speedster types, more of the field stretchers, I think Jalen Royals can be an option potentially. But the 2 guys I think you need to keep an eye on for are Isaiah Bond and Jalen Noel. I think those are the 2 guys that would fit that mold the most.
Yeah, I think a good way to, honestly, almost a fun way to like connect all the dots is if you're looking straight speed, I think the best option is Isaiah Bond. Looking for your slot guy, Restrepo is the guy to go for. And I think that
Yep.
Jalen Noel offers you a really cool blend of if you wanted him to do either of those, he probably could. And because of that, those are the guys I think we would agree are probably the fits and the people that the Bears, if you're trying to do the Ben Johnson offense from Detroit, the people the Bears have their eye on.
I definitely agree. I think those are the names to keep an eye out for. And we probably talked about more receivers that are relevant to the Bears than we probably should have. But I hope you guys were able to get a good feel for this class. I hope we broke down top guys well. Luke, is there anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
I got a hot dinner date with mom here coming up in 2 minutes, so this worked out perfect.
Okay, there you go. All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for us. So until we meet again.
Peace out, Bears fans. Bear down.